What I'm about to say, I don't want you to think that I'm being flippant about the repercussions of the financial crisis, but I do think we ought to lighten the discussion sometimes and think positive, and I'm very good. My blood type is B positive, and that is what I have always been. So you'll all be aware that the RMA definition for environment includes ecosystems and their constituent parts, including people and communities. We often forget that, I think. And the purpose of the Act is to promote sustainable management, i.e. managing the use, development and protection of natural and physical resources in a way or at a rate which enables people and communities to provide for their social, economic and cultural well-being and for their health and safety. So what do people need to provide for their social, economic and cultural well-being, including their health and safety? And how will the global crisis affect those needs? For the purposes of this discussion, I've identified 5 things that I think people need for their physical and psychological well-being. Those things are adequate shelter, an adequate supply of nutritious food, strong communities and supportive social networks, a quality living environment, and a sense of achievement and happiness. So how has the global financial crisis impacted on these? It's easy to focus on the negative. We all know people who are losing jobs, and we all know our investments have turned to dust recently. But I'm going to look at what are the perhaps less obvious positive benefits of the financial crisis for communities based on those 5 basic needs. The first is adequate shelter. Shelter is a basic human right, but affordable housing has become increasingly unobtainable for a significant portion of the population. Now, as a result of the crisis, house prices are coming down. Nationally, there's been a 9% reduction in house prices in the last 6 months. Interest rates are the lowest in living memory, so houses are now more affordable than they've been for many years. This is all very superficial because he's going to pull the plug on me soon, so I'll just... Nutritious food. There has been an upsurge in people growing their own food and people buying from farmers' markets. For years, people have been sitting in front of telly, watching Hugh Fernley-Wottenstall and Jamie Oliver growing their own veggies and cooking simple, wholesome meals and thinking, wouldn't that be nice? Now, increasingly, we are sharing the experience. This has an additional benefit for the natural environment. Homegrown veggies and fruit don't come with packaging. What we don't eat goes in the compost bin or gets fed to the chooks or pigs, as any fan of Riverside Cottage will know. Supportive social networks. Because there is less money around for going out for entertainment, travelling out of town for weekends and going on holidays overseas, people will be staying home, mixing with local friends and neighbours and engaging with local groups. The potluck dinners of the 1970s with families coming together in each other's homes might make a comeback. We might actually find we have time to volunteer a few hours to a local community group now that we are home more often, especially if our work hours are cut. To cut down the cost of travelling to work, more people are using public transport or carpooling. Hundreds of people have been registering every week for Greater Wellington's Regional Council's new initiative, Let's Carpool. These modes of travel bring us into contact with other people in our community. Instead of travelling in our own private little 4-wheel bubble to and from work, we're going to be out there engaging with others, people we don't know. We might make some new friends. Quality of living environment. Reducing car travel, buying less packaged food, buying less stuff, reusing things instead of throwing them out will all help to clean up our living environment. You may also have noticed that there's been a reduction in the number of historic buildings coming down and being replaced by much taller buildings, which cut out our sunlight and views. Unless there's a shift in consciousness before the financial crisis ends, this will just be a temporary respite. but at least in the short term, the old familiar buildings, sunlight and views are adding to the quality of our living environment. Make the most of it. One more, yeah. He's going to biffy on sense of achievement and happiness. It is generally true that the more you have, the more you want, and the law of diminishing returns applies to the level of satisfaction you gain from each new purchase. We are surrounded by stuff. We have lost the art of finding delight in small things. We've been drowning in conspicuous consumption because that is what we've been told is necessary to be somebody and have friends. Now we're going to have to cut back, think twice before we buy, and that will increase the pleasure and satisfaction we get from what we do buy. It is not true that nobody loves you when you're down and out. Those of us who have been through the mass layoffs of the 1980s and early 90s know that hard times can strengthen friendships and family relationships. Maybe this financial crisis will help get us off the superhighway that was heading for environmental disaster and onto the track that will lead us to a healthy, sustainable world community.